Rose, do you remember what work you did?
Murals for lunch on Thursday.
Rose? No, who wants to speak, especially from the old timers? So, Zev, what did you do? Wait, Zev, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here. What's up, Aaron? How are you?
I thought you couldn't be on. No, so let's hear a minute. So what community service did you do? You in Jerusalem, right? You in the
did.
program in
Well,
Jerusalem.
we were the first 3-week program that was like half the time in Jerusalem, half at Spot. And in Jerusalem, we painted seniors' homes. We went in, and then in Spot, we helped with one of the playgrounds, I think, or garden areas that you see the plaques on the wall when you're in Spot.
Okay. My team, eventually, I'm going to try to get everyone to relate a little bit about, not today, but another opportunity afterwards for everyone to tell us what community service they did, and maybe send a picture or two.
Oh yeah, the Livnot truck. Yeah, the Livnot truck.
Susan, what did you do?
Hey.
Hi.
How are you?
What did you do in your group?
Sorry, 1 second.
What community service did you do?
Are you asking me, Aaron?
Which Susan?
Everybody mute when you are not speaking.
Yes.
Right? If you're not speaking, mute.
Actually, can you circle back?
Right.
I'm in a class. I'm kind of in between, so come back to me if you don't mind.
Mine's for other people.
I want to mute.
Greetings, Haroon, from
Hi,
Miami
Mark.
Airport, about to board the El Al flight to our beloved Israel. The Heathrow Bakaro.
Looking forward to talking to you tomorrow, and we'll try to clarify some of those questions you asked.
Toda.
Okay. Who else would like to say? I don't. What's a story now, Missy? What are we? I mean, people are signing in, but there's far from 250 people here.
He was my counselor.
So maybe we'll start slowly. If you want to, I mean, we said 8 o'clock. It's 8:04. So maybe
no, at least 8:10. At least 8:10.
Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna mute everyone because there's a lot of background, and then when you want to speak, just unmute yourself.
Well, let's wait till 8:10 to mute people. Okay, let's.
Right.
You can still mute yourself.
I'd like to say hello.
How do you mute me and
I'd like to
make
say
my
hello.
video?
Hi.
I'm Stephanie.
Listen, everybody has to say your name and when were you on the program?
Rena Benoit, number 1. Hi.
Number 1.
I was on number 1. I'm so proud to be. We were the very first one in January. We were in Spot and Sderot, and I'm so happy to see everybody.
Okay.
It's great.
Just for your knowledge, number 1 was in 1980.
Okay.
Of adult.
And there's people here from 1980. There'll be people from 1980 on the call.
Well, I count in that category too. 1987.
1981.
You
And
were
then
on program
January.
25. Leah was in 1981,
81.
right?
Yes.
Program number 4.
Yes. Program number 4.
Yeah.
This is a Zoom meeting, and I'm like,
Why can't
Just a reminder for people to also open up the chat, because people are going to be writing things in them, and they may be either personal to you or to everyone.
I'm
So just to keep track of things that are going on.
Register. So go ahead, Grant.
I was on program number 10.
Go to read it.
1984. 1980, 85.
1983.
1983, okay.
And we did
Lot 49's in the house.
digging out the
Lot
library.
49.
Register. They didn't send you to. But you're waiting to register. They're still the same building. Yeah, there's.
Is anyone here from the first program in spot from 1980?
We just heard one.
To find the link they sent. The link would have been after you registered. So wherever that said register, it's going to be later, earlier. Don't keep going down. Where it was where you registered.
I was 1981 in the second one.
Okay, no. So it's going to be this year, not going to be.
Yeah, but you also came back. Is that Jay?
Yeah, I worked in Sedora in February.
How was it to come back to a whole different Livnot?
It was amazing. It was great to see you, and it was great to be in Israel, and it was great to be part of something.
So I hope a lot of people on the call, and we'll say this again, come to see us in another completely different world as older adults, and also we'll talk about this later, your relatives. Missy, do you want to start? What do you say, Missy?
So how about do you want to introduce Elliot?
No, let me start. Let me give a little bit of an intro
Okay, great.
first, and then I'll
Okay, great.
introduce Elliot.
Okay.
Okay, do you want to put everyone on mute?
Okay.
Ellie, mute everybody. I guess that's what we're doing. Okay.
Okay, so everyone is muted. Before you start, you're gonna have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Okay, do you hear me? Do you hear me? I think I unmuted myself.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, fine. Okay, welcome everybody. Now, let me just start and say if there's a siren, you'll hear it, and I'm gonna just run down to the tunnels to the safe room. And I'll be gone for 10 minutes. And that's what we do. I think we had about 10 today in Sfat, and we all get it in Israel some way or another. And anyways, of course, I'm very happy to see you guys and be seen. All of you who know me for many years, you know I get very emotional in situations like this. I like to blame my mother that she used to always get emotional. And, you know, especially when I see these faces here, who I knew you many years ago, and we went through very powerful experiences together in building and being built by the land. Over the years, Livnot, in the 45 years that we've been here, we've been through many, many crises. Such as Corinne mentioned with the Ethiopians in the first Aliyah, also the second Aliyah of Ethiopians, we were very involved. This is our third Lebanese war. In the first one, is there anyone here that was here after the first Lebanese war? A lot of what we did is we filled sandbags at bunkers in the Golan. But we did all kinds of things. We worked in the hospital for families that visited. In the second Lebanese war, we ran Sfat completely. During the war, the whole municipality left, and the emergency number came to us. Mainly, we took care of the elderly. In Sfat, there were 70 Filipinos who had to leave, and we took over for them. And this is our third one. We're going to talk a little bit about our involvement in the third Lebanese war. Let me just say before, well, a couple of guys from the January came in December you started. In December we at the beginning we were doing food and bomb shelters. We did 120 bomb shelters, I think, before you guys came in Tzfat. And for much of the war, most of the war, we've been hosting soldiers. We have room for 80. We have 80 beds in Tzfat. And in most of the war, a few units of the army used our campus completely. On the whole, they don't want everyone to sleeping at bases. If you're around here, the Hezbollah doesn't really aim for Tzfat. They aim for the bases next to Tzfat. So they want as many people as possible not to be in the base at the time. But as also as Zave mentioned, we've painted literally thousands of apartments over the years of the elderly. And what Livnot is a program of to build and to be built. And that's what we're bringing to the world. That's what we've been doing for 45 years. And that's what we want to continue to do for at least another 45 years, but at least the years to come. And you guys, I'd ask you to raise your hands, but I can't see you. But a lot of people here were on over the last 10 months of us doing in 31 communities, doing 180 over 180 projects. According to the Army, we were the main organization doing projects. A lot of the community said they couldn't have come back in if we weren't here, if you guys sitting here that worked for us for a week or two in the South wouldn't have been here. And that's what we're going to continue to do. And we're going to continue to, hopefully we're going to start in the North, even a lot bigger than what we're doing in the South. We're starting already getting the area ready for us to come in. And we're very fortunate to be able to provide an opportunity for people to come again at a different stage of life and be part of building the land of Israel, which we want to continue to do. Although we definitely want to focus on another crowd, which Lior will talk about. Okay, I'm really Michael, who many of you know. Michael came to Livnot about 1990 and has been involved since and is still very much involved. He was supposed to be introducing Elliot, but he got called to leave the country a little bit, about 12 kilometers north of us to the Lebanese border. Michael is going in for his third time. Michael, at the age of very young, 60-something, is still in a combat unit in paratroopers. And I think he lies about his age. And anyway, so he just called in today. Hopefully, he's going to be able to pop on for a minute or two. But let me introduce Elliot. Elliot is our key speaker, and we want to share with you what's happening. And there's no better person in the world than Elliot. Elliot is a major in reserves, but he's very active. I'll just tell one story about Elliot. My son, one of my sons was in the Navy SEALs of Israel, and we walked on the base. You know the story, Elliot, right? He saw you and he knew you because you taught here. And he called me up. He said, not on the cell phone. He called me up after and said, "What's Elliot doing on the base?" No, he told me that you were on the base. And so he said to me that you wrote the training book for the Navy SEALs. So that's Elliot. So, okay, with that, Elliot, Elliot's a popular speaker on television and reporting. And for many years, he gave us insights that no one else could possibly do like Elliot. So Elliot, take it away.
Thanks, Aaron. In the time that we have, what I want to do is start from the beginning, but zoom quickly up to where we are. The news changes with us pretty much every day. So I'd rather go into some analysis of what's going on behind and around it than try to keep up with it. But I'll bring us up to date before I finish, and up to date literally what's going on today. But I want to go back to a year ago, and starting with the catastrophe, possibly the greatest failure in the history of the IDF on Shabbat Simchat Torah, October 7th, a year ago. And I don't want to belabor the point. There's still analysis being done on it. I'm still writing things on it, but an utter and total failure of the system. And it's a failure that didn't start on the 7th. The 7th was a low point of it. And part of where we are today is trying to catch up from what led to the 7th. A mindset that went back well over a decade, thinking that we don't really need a very powerful army. It goes back even to the times of Ehud Barak as chief of staff, that the army can be small and smart, small and clever, rely on high tech, not need what we call today kinetic. We don't need tanks. We don't need helicopters. We have cameras. We have computers. We have automated responses. And really, that's all you need to do. And with that, a mindset of an enemy that really doesn't think very differently from we do. Hamas and Hezbollah are really interested in their internal politics, in improving the lives of their constituents. They're deterred. And I'll just say as an aside, I'm an expert on deterrence. It's a whole course in and of itself. They were not deterred, obviously, and things that I wrote about long before the 7th. But nonetheless, on the morning of the 7th, we know what happened. The horrendous massacre of 6,000 terrorists coming across the border, breaking through the most sophisticated barrier with bulldozers and pickup trucks. By the way, full disclosure, I am devoutly low tech. Give me a pickup truck rather than a camera. That's the bad news. The good news actually begins almost immediately. And it's hard to say this because the 7th and into the 8th were horrendous days. And I'm not going to recount all the horrors of those days. But the recovery began almost immediately, not from the top of the system, but more from the bottom. People rushing in on their own accord, reservists, regulars who were home for Shabbat and for holiday, units. I'll just give you one example. One infantry company tried to get down there, or an already called up company, and the Air Force wasn't prepared to fly them because they didn't have helicopters prepared to fly. The company commander called a friend of his who was a helicopter pilot and asked an Air Force helicopter pilot, and asked him to do him a personal favor and get the helicopters to fly the company down to the Gaza area. So really very much a maverick, do-it-yourself kind of response. And here again, the books have yet to be written. The movies will never be shown because they'll be unbelievable. Hollywood couldn't imagine making films of what actually happened there on that day. However, within less than 36 hours, the IDF and the country had reversed the horrors of the first day. And really, to understand where we are today, we need to understand those first 36 to 48 hours. It's becoming clearer and clearer that the original plan, Sinwar's original plan, was for Hezbollah and with it Iran, their militias, their proxies, to join in on the attack. Now here, I have to say, I served in Northern Command for a decade. I finished in Northern Command about 4 years ago. And one of the concern, the great concern of the IDF was that Hezbollah was going to do across the northern border what Hamas actually did on October 7th. and more information about that is coming out now as we operate in South Lebanon. These are things that we were aware of. And their plan was to get as far as Haifa and beyond. And here I can say with absolute certainty that had they gone in simultaneous with Hamas on the 7th, the massacre of the north would have dwarfed what happened in the south. What apparently happened is that Sinwar, for reasons of his own security, and it made sense to him at the time, didn't tell Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, what date the operation was going to be. So Nasrallah was caught as much by surprise as everybody else. And his plan, once again, I say apparently based on very good speculation and some inside information, was to wait a couple of days, let the IDF get fully engaged in the south, because Hamas's plan was to hold out, to grab communities, to go as far as Hebron in Judea, cut Israel in half, and hold out for about 30 days in communities in southern Israel. And here I just want to reiterate, within 36 hours, they were all gone. In other words, from a purely military perspective, it was a horrific defeat for Hamas, once again, without taking anything away from the horrors of what they did. Nasrallah's idea was to wait 48 hours. Israel was a divided country. It was in the midst of enormous political upheaval. There was talk of refusal to serve in the reserves. And his experience from 2006, and those who were here during the Second Lebanon War may remember this, there was a great deal of hesitation then on the part of the Israeli leadership and the high command of the IDF of whether to really fully go in against Hezbollah, and ultimately it didn't happen. So Nasrallah, understanding Israel as he understood it, figured we'll give it a day or two or three, and then we'll jump in as Israel is focused in the south. Much to everyone's surprise on the other side, Israel responded not only from the ground up, as I said before, but also beginning already on that Shabbat and Sunday from the top down. The leaders of the demonstrations basically said demonstrations are over. Anybody who gets called up, go to serve. The army, within less than 24 hours, initiated the largest reserve call-up in Israel's history and the fastest executed ever in Israel's history. Within 3 days, 400,000 reservists were on the borders, many in the south, but also many in the north. In other words, Hezbollah was now facing an army, not an unarmed civilian population. The civilian population along the northern border was evacuated. As we know, to this day, nearly 100,000 Israelis were displaced. I have my own comments about that, not for here because it's a whole story in and of itself, but that took them out, at least initially, took them out of range of what Hezbollah had planned for them. And within a couple of days, the Israeli Air Force and artillery began pounding Gaza. Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, at that point made a strategic decision, essentially saying, you know what, it was a really good plan, but we're not doing that. We don't want Lebanon to turn into what Israel's about to do to Gaza, or at least we'll wait and see. And with that, he began rocket fire. Up to here, the deep background. The decision was made, and with a great deal of strategic logic, to go after Hamas. And from November until today, we are operating air, land, and sea against Hamas in Gaza. The summary of the South is that we have essentially shattered Hamas as a military organization. I emphasize, as a military organization. They started this war with some 28 battalions. There are roughly 2 understrength, damaged, beat up battalions left in Hamas. And we're fighting now a guerrilla war in Gaza, a counterinsurgency, which, by the way, we anticipated. And that may go on for quite a while because Hamas is not surrendering. At the same time, we have on both fronts, but I'm going to focus now for a moment on what happened in the south, went after the leadership of Hamas, culminating with this past week's elimination of Yahya Sinwar. But the question, how many battalions? 20. They started with 28. They're down to 2 damaged ones. The elimination of Yahya Sinwar following, of course, taking out Ismail Hania in Tehran a few months ago. But what's gotten somewhat less news, Mohammed Def was also one of the leaders of their military operation, who survived 7 attempts on his life, but not 8. Their brigade commanders, their battalion commanders, their staff. And what I'm about to say about Hamas will apply to Hezbollah as well. This wasn't just about taking out an individual leader here and an individual leader there. We have utterly dismantled their command structure, which means that Hamas as a military organization is no longer functioning. Its people are fighting. They still have rockets dug into launchers. They are launching them periodically, and it's going to be a while until we completely finish with them. But for all intents and purposes, Hamas, the military threat, has been eliminated. And here I'm going to say again something about Hamas that I'll say about Hezbollah as well in a few moments. And that is what will ultimately be critical here is whether Israel, after this is over, and whether it's over in a few weeks or a few months or 6 months, whether we hold to the promise that we made in 2000 and again in 2005 and again in 2006 and in 2009 and 14, etc. And that is zero tolerance for the building of Hamas military and terrorist organization in Gaza. If we poo-poo it, if we say, well, until they build up to a strength where they can do another October 7th, we're not going to worry about them. We're going to see another October 7th 2, 3, 5, 7 years down the road. So the key here is what do we do the morning after? And not in terms of what Secretary of State Blinken is saying, but rather in military and security terms, do we permit Hamas to rebuild and regroup in the Gaza Strip? And do we prevent it militarily when, not if, but when they start doing that? In the meantime, that fight is winding down. I'll just say one thing looking sort of a bit into the future in the aftermath of taking out Yahya Sinwar. Who's going to take over for him? My guess is that his position, which was the fusion of 2 positions, when we took out Ismail Hania, his job was taken over by Sinwar, in addition to Sinwar being in command of Gaza. That position, I think, will be divided again. One of the so-called political leaders of Hamas, the guys who are living in the 7-star hotels in Qatar, one of them will become the leader of the so-called political wing. There's no such thing as a political and military wing, but the so-called political wing, most likely Khalid Mashal, but I can't say for sure. I'll get to the hostages in a moment. And in Gaza, possibly Sinwar's brother, who apparently is even more fanatical than he was, and there are a few other candidates, none of them particularly important as far as we're concerned, because they're ruling over an essentially shattered military organization. Last but not least, what about the hostages? I think we want to make a deal. I believe that we have wanted to make a deal, and the deal from our perspective becomes easier and easier the more and more Hamas is beaten up. In other words, a ceasefire, let's say 6 months ago, would have been a tremendous boon to Hamas and permitting it to rebuild. A ceasefire today, not so much. They don't have that much to rebuild with. I don't mean a permanent ceasefire. I'm talking about giving them 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks to do that. If they still want victory in return for the hostages, I don't see a deal happening. That was Sinwar's idea and Sinwar's point. And we'll see whoever takes over, whether they are willing to come to some sort of compromise loss, or whether they hold on to the idea of victory. I want to say one more thing about the hostages without going into how many are alive and how many aren't. One of the misconceptions that we've had in terms of dealing with the hostage situation, and I hate to say this, there are a lot of things that I say that I don't like to say, is that there are actually two types of hostages in general in the world. And we've treated the hostage situation in Gaza as one type in particular, what I'll call the classic criminal type, and that is people who kidnap people or take hostages in order to trade them for something, whether it's money or goods, or in this case, for terrorists who are being held in our prisons. But not all hostages are taken for that purpose, particularly when we talk about hostages taken by fascist Nazi totalitarian systems. And Nazi Germany was a classic, but not the only one. And those are the hostages that are taken as insurance, and they are not up for negotiation. There was the 6 hostages that were murdered a month or so ago, 6 weeks ago, were not murdered for the reasons the press is saying. And that is that they were afraid that they would be rescued. They knew they weren't going to be rescued. The IDF was still too far away. They were murdered, and their bodies were left as a sign to Israel that if you don't stop, we are going to kill the hostages. The Nazis would do it. They would go into an area, they would round up 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people at random and say, the first act of resistance, we're going to take out 100 of them at random and shoot them. And they did. They were not there for negotiating. And it's my belief that Hamas is holding at least some hostages, if not all of them at this point, for those purposes, in which case a deal will be approached, they'll get close to it, they'll move toward it, and all this report of they've come closer, they've closed the gap, that's classic negotiating nonsense. A deal isn't a deal until it's made. In my opinion, Hamas is not willing to give up the hostages. But we'll see, and I hope I'm wrong on that. There's a lot of stuff that I do when I say I hope I'm wrong. The strategy of giving safe passage of money to anybody giving information is a great idea. Hamas says we'll kill you. So it becomes a bit of a tricky deal. We do have people working on the other side. We do have informers on the other side. We do get information from them. I want to move on. I'll get to Iran as well, but I want to move on to Hezbollah. We moved into Lebanon recently, but okay, I see all these questions coming up. I can't deal with them as they pop up, so I'll leave time at the end and try to deal with them. For the period from October until a little over a month ago, it seemed that Israel was playing a tit-for-tat game with Hezbollah. They would fire rockets, we would bomb some targets, and it would go back and forth like that. Today we can say in public, things that some of us knew but could not say in public, that there were 2 strategies going on during those months. One, an aerial strategy, and the other, a ground strategy. The aerial strategy was taking out quite a bit of Hezbollah's supply, their rockets, their launching capability, what we call their infrastructure. And here you should know that the official estimates are that Hezbollah started with 150,000 rockets. My estimate is that it was over 300,000 rockets. I won't go into why the discrepancy between my numbers and the official numbers, but in either case, many of those were destroyed by Israeli airstrikes in warehouses in the course of the months from this past October. Over 700 targets in South Lebanon were destroyed by Israeli Special Forces operations on the ground between October and about 6 weeks ago. I'm going to say that again, over 700 targets were destroyed on the ground with ground operations by Special Forces. And that was one of the best kept secrets, not only from Hezbollah, but from the world, that only was permitted to be released as information in the past couple of weeks. At the same time, we slowly but surely ground down their command echelon, but still the eruption began about a month ago first with the pagers and then the walkie-talkies. Two operations that, by the way, have been in the works for years. In other words, this was a planned strike against Hezbollah that was being held until the appropriate moment. And the appropriate moment was when the decision was made, now we're going to go after them fully. The pagers and walkie-talkies, let's just be clear, were among the most targeted strikes possible. In other words, if you had a Hezbollah pager or walkie-talkie, it was because you were somebody, not necessarily high-ranking. And here I'll just mention as an aside, taking out the high-ranking guys is important, and I'll mention that in a moment. But taking out the middle and lower management is even more important if you can do it laterally across the boards. If you want to think of this in military terms, it's more important to take out all of the company and battalion commanders in a brigade than the brigade commander. You can replace one person much more easily than you can the entire command echelon of the lower ranks. But we did this vertically and horizontally. In other words, the high command was taken out up to including Hassan Nasrallah, his number two, and I don't mean, let me clarify a point here. The perpetual number two of Hezbollah is a guy named Naim Qasim. He's always been number two. That's because he's their spokesman. He's not really the second in command. And he's still around and he's still talking. And I seriously doubt whether we'll bother going after him because he's not worth it. But Fuad Shukr, Ibrahim Akil, and others who were part of the command echelon, the field echelon going up through the equivalent of their brigade and higher commands, their staffs, their communications experts, their rockets experts have essentially all been eliminated. And for those who over the years have debated whether what is called targeted killing or targeted assassination is a successful or correct strategy, this is not that. This is the obliteration of an entire command structure and its communications and command and control. The result of that is what we're seeing today. And that is that the ground forces that went in and are still going in, and here I'm going to say this very obliquely without giving away any classified information, we have not seen the last ground forces go into Lebanon. It started with a division, and then it went to 2, and then it went to 4, and it's going to go more than that. The overwhelming success on the ground is reaching the equivalency of the overwhelming success on the ground in Gaza. And I should have mentioned it there, so I'll just say it here. And I don't belittle the tragedy of any soldier killed, and I have friends who were killed in this fighting. In purely military terms, in Gaza, we have killed over 20,000 terrorists and lost some 400 soldiers in the process. By any stretch of the imagination, that is an overwhelming victory success on the ground. And what we're seeing in Lebanon is the beginning of something equivalent. 2 final points on this, and then I'll say a few words about Iran and give you a chance to ask questions. One is that Hamas and Hezbollah, and I'm going to focus now on Hezbollah, are going to rebuild their command structure. Hezbollah has already announced that they have completely filled all of the positions that were open by the Israeli targeting of their leadership. And I'm sure that's true. But they've put people into those positions who come from so low in the system that Israeli intelligence doesn't even know who these people are. In other words, they know who they are in terms of their names, but never heard of them before. I know we're in postseason baseball in America, so this is like bringing somebody in from lower minor leagues to pitch the World Series. They may be able to stand on the mound and throw the ball, but we're looking at an organization that is completely devastated in terms of its command ability. And that's being felt on the ground in the ground fighting in South Lebanon. And last but not least, Aaron mentioned it earlier, we've also seen rockets in our neighborhood, including today. As bad as the rocket fire is and as dangerous it is, and I'm not poo-pooing it in the least, Hezbollah's plan was to fire between 1,500 and 2,000 rockets a day into Israel during a war. Today, they're firing 100, 120, 150. And once again, I don't want to blow that off and say it's nothing, but given what they were planning to do, and anybody who's been following the news of the past, prior to October 7th, the past few years, and the fears of the Israeli system and home front command of the devastating damage that the home front would suffer in a war with Hezbollah, in part because if they fire 2,000 a day, Iron Dome will not be able to engage them all, and many of them will fall. Today, the numbers that they're firing are at the limit, but still within the capability of Israel's defenses. And the result is what we've seen, which is damage for sure, injuries and deaths for sure, but nowhere near the scale of what was anticipated. And that's thanks to the operations that went on over the months and over the past month in particular, high intensity against Hezbollah, all of which have been very successful. Iran, as commonly referred to, the head of the snake. And here we have a problem. And the problem is that Israel does not have the capability to fully engage Iran on its own in an utterly successful way. We can do damage to them, we can do destruction to them, but even as we saw in the 2 ballistic missile attacks against Israel, American support was critical, whether it was intelligence, electronic aid, and interception. And here I'll say that the Israeli system intercepted most of what was intercepted, although the Americans and the Brits, by the way, intercepted some of them. The ability to strike with overwhelming, devastating power against Iran is beyond the capability of the Israeli Air Force. Heavy damage, yes. Strategic damage, yes. But to engage Iran in a war now, while we're engaged in Gaza and in Lebanon with Hezbollah, would be an extremely complex mission for Israel. Please note, I didn't say that Israel couldn't do it, but extremely complex. And for that reason, along with some others, including very bad decision-making on the part of Israeli leadership over the past decade, cutting back the size of the military, cutting back our munitions storage and build up, the artillery shells that we're firing today, we did not have a year ago. It's all being supplied by the United States. Many of the bombs that we're dropping, supplied by the United States. Spare parts for the F-16s, the F-15s, the F-35s come from the United States. We are short 2 Apache helicopter squadrons because somebody in their wisdom about 5 or 6 years ago said, we don't need 4 squadrons, we can manage with 2. The 2 squadrons that we have are operating at the absolute limits of their capabilities. If we get more, they can only come from the United States. So, hint, hint, Israel has to pay attention to what America says and play part of that game to make sure America is on board when Israel has to deal with Iran directly. So, on that happy note, let me see. I saw some questions come up, but I can't get to them. So what I'm going to do is...
Okay, so thank you very much,
Yes.
Elliot. When Ellie is going to, if you raise your hand, if you go to the bar down below, there's you have a way that says what's it called there?
React. There's react and raise hand.
Okay. But where do they find it, Ellie? I
So-
don't see it on mine.
So if somebody else could call, because I'm totally technically illiterate and I don't see hands, or if I wouldn't know what to do if
Okay, so
one went
Ellie,
up. So
okay, so if you raise
Melissa.
your hand, Ellie will unmute
Missy.
you.
Okay.
Okay, can we, Missy, am I heard?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, can we maybe let Elliot look at some of the chats, and why don't we go have a little bit of a break and go into some paid announcements. It's advertising for Livnot.
Okay.
Okay, for 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, Elliot.
I can see the stuff now. I got it.
Yeah.
But
Okay, but
let me deal with
let's just say a few words first. Okay.
whatever.
Okay, Leora. Leora, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi,
Yeah,
everyone.
so introduce yourself, or I'll introduce Leora. Leora's parents, she joined Livnot about 2 months ago, and she's our partnership creator. And in recruiting, she's in charge of getting people to Livnot. So why don't you say something about why do we want people coming to Livnot, and we want you guys. We need you guys for that. Okay, yeah, Leora.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you, Elliot, and to everyone who tuned in. It's so cool to see so many passionate Livnot alum from all over the world. So I'm Leora. I'm the partnerships manager. I live in the north in Israel. Thank God we haven't had too many sirens over here, but it's still not the best situation. So as many of you know, we have a lot of work to do right now at Livnot. We have been asked by the IDF and by the Gaza border communities, and soon also in the north, to accomplish so many projects. We're restoring buildings, we're restoring community centers and private homes in these communities on the Gaza border, and many of you here have taken part in that, and kol hakavod to you all. And we have a lot of work to do. And so that's where the partnerships come in. We're looking to create partnerships with local Jewish organizations to help bring groups of people, just like you all, to our programs. And we've actually recently partnered with the JFNA Serve Israel initiative, and they are helping to fund participants to join programs, volunteer programs in Israel. So if any of you are active, if any of you are leaders or a part of JCC or a federation or a Jewish organization, and you think you can help us bring people, that would be really amazing if you could respond to the email. I'm the one who sent you the confirmation email with the Zoom link. And so you can just respond to that email and let me know, hey, I want to make a difference for the Jewish people right now. I want to help rebuild Israel. Now is really your opportunity to do that. So we'd really appreciate your partnership. So thank you. And I just want to also reinforce you all probably know that Livnot is not just a one-time program. It's not like you come to Livnot and you go home and that's it. Livnot really creates like a spark and lights a fire in people to become more active in their Jewish communities and to just become more engaged. And that's really our goal here in creating these partnerships, is that people come to Israel, they fall in love with Israel, they connect to Judaism maybe for the first time, then they come back and they want to be more active participants in their communities, in your communities. So we would really appreciate your support and your help, and thank you so much for being here.
Okay, I just want to add one sentence. The grant from the Federation, JFNA is the Jewish Federal or Jewish Federation, the National of North America. So they're actually giving us money for people 21 to 40-year-olds. And we have another foundation that's gave us $175,000. And these two we have to match to make it happen. But the most important thing to us is to be able to bring participants. And that we need you guys. And we need every one of you to think, all the time I hear that, yeah, my nephew just went to Israel to volunteer. Well, everybody has a nephew and a neighbor's nephew. and let them know about Livnot, because Livnot, what we do, first of all, we're the only ones who are doing building. Right now, 2 of the kibbutzim want us to do like 50 houses in each one of houses that were shut up. Now, we do it, once again, with a professional together with the volunteers. And we have a lot of work to do, and we need help to do that. And we're the only ones doing building. And so if you know, and besides that, the initiative of the Federation, you need to have an educational programming. We have probably like 5 times as much educational programming than any other of the volunteer options. And of course, in Livnot, we have Shabbat. And we have really Shabbat, not just Kiddush in a dining room, but we really experience Shabbat, as every one of you, and I know a lot of you, experience Shabbat, a very meaningful one, or several Shabbats, or many Shabbats with Livnot. And that's the main thing. What we want to do is create the foundation for continuing the Jewish journey. Okay, Missy, you want to go take it over, Elliot?
We had a question. Mark raised his hand first. Mark, if you wanted to ask your question to Elliot.
Good. Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, I'm Susan Korneski, Mark's other half. We both did Livnot together. My question, Elliot, and you may remember us from, we were there in 1990. We once stayed with you for Shabbat. My question has to do with, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, UNIFIL or UNIFIL. And what is going on there in terms of, are they passively supporting Hezbollah? Are they voluntarily being sort of like in the way, or are they actively, quietly supporting them? Like what's going on with that?
So the fundamental problem is not UNIFIL, although UNIFIL is certainly a problem. The problem is that UNIFIL is operating under the auspices of UN Security Council Resolution 1701 that ended the war in 2006. And here I have to say, whoever was on the Israeli side, Tzipi Livni was the foreign minister. She thought it was a great achievement. She apparently didn't read the resolution. The resolution calls for the withdrawal of all military, all armed force, specifically Israel, from South Lebanon. Hezbollah is not mentioned by name in 1701 in any of its operative paragraphs. And it says that it should follow according to the agreements of the Taif Agreement, which was signed in 1989 among the different groups in Lebanon under the auspices of the Syrians, calling for the disarming of all armed groups in Lebanon except for Hezbollah. In other words, UNIFIL is operating today under a UN mandate that basically says its job is to keep Israel out of South Lebanon. So they're doing their job. Now, do I think it's horrendous? Do I think it's outrageous? Absolutely. Do I think that they have no place there? Absolutely. But I wouldn't blame UNIFIL. The blame is in the Security Council. The blame is in the General Assembly, the Secretary General, who in the day used to hobnob with Yasser Arafat, with member nations like France and Italy. Need I go on? So what we're seeing in UNIFIL is basically an on-the-ground reflection of the United Nations. And frankly, they're an obstacle. They're not doing anything. They're in the sense of physically preventing the IDF from operating. They don't have anywhere near the wherewithal to do that. But what they're doing is being a pain. They're being used by Hezbollah as shields. And of course, if we fire at Hezbollah and UNIFIL bases get hit or observation posts get hit, we catch the world's condemnation for it. But as I said, UNIFIL is kind of the facade of the problem, not really the problem itself.
Thank you so much.
Elliot, maybe Elliot was interviewed the other day by the Israeli news in English, and I think we sent it out to some people. Anybody who wants it, so just write to us and we'll send it out to you.
let me add
He's
to that. I have a
interviewed about
podcast.
UNIFIL. Yeah.
I have a podcast called Conflict Uncovered. It's available out there on Spotify. That there's a Facebook page for it as well. So if you're interested, please go in, sign up, like, all of the stuff that you do with podcasts. Send it around. The more, the merrier. And yes, and by all means, you can send out my contact information. If you have a question, you can write to me. My email is my name, elliot.chodoff@gmail. If I don't answer you within a day or two, keep sending it until I do, because being a nudnik counts in this business. I've got a lot of stuff on my plate. And as I said, I just did a podcast today on Sinwar and taking out Sinwar. It should appear by tomorrow, etc. So let me just say quickly, if I'm already plugging it, the podcast conversations range in the 15 to 20-minute range. The idea is not to keep you tied down for an hour and a half. Their commentary they're not reporting, hence Conflict Uncovered, not covered. And as I develop it, it's only a couple of months old. It's going to include a lot of background stuff on who are these guys. In other words, not just up-to-date analysis. Who is Hezbollah? Who is Hamas? As well as concepts. What is deterrence? Counterterrorism? What does all of this mean? All these words that we see and hear by talking heads who usually have no idea what they're talking about.
Thank you, Ellie. So we have a couple more questions and we'll hand over to Missy. So Sharon or Sharon G, you're up.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. This might be a real Captain Obvious kind of question, but I'm just wondering, can we say with pretty much certainty that the weapons that were used on October 7th and subsequently both by Hamas and Hezbollah were from Iran directly or from Qatar? Like, where are they
getting
so much? Yeah.
The delivery is from Iran. In other words, the means of getting them in, whether it was overland along the Philadelphia corridor, tunnels in the Philadelphia corridor, or by sea, and there was a huge smuggling operation by sea as well. That was all. The delivery was Iran. The supply was Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. And the money is Qatar, Iran, and all sorts of other means of raising funds, including charities in the United States, in Europe, and places like that, as well as UN and international funds that went into all sorts of humanitarian projects in Gaza that ended up either buying weapons or developing tunnels or whatever. And here is not, it wasn't just weapons. Their communication systems were super high tech German machinery that was brought in clearly overland. It wasn't dropped over, over the side of a boat. So there was a shipping element to this as well, not just smuggling. But once again, delivery Iran, production Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, money Iran, Qatar, and the rest of the world, and their charities.
Right. Okay. That's what I thought. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we have a couple more. Melanie.
Hi, I'm Melanie Marin. I'm in Northern Virginia. Look, I haven't been very engaged in Livnot since the 20 years ago, but this really captivated me. And what I want to relay is
you muted yourself.
Sorry, I got it. Thank you.
Just...
But myself and others in the community are really hungry for accurate information. I mean, just to give you some context, I live in Northern Virginia, which is actually now the leading Jewish population in the Metro DC area. And all, and I'm in the largest school division in Virginia, and the constant dialogue is Israel is a colonialist nation, and there's not an understanding of the history. So even just sharing that, these nations are partnering to, attack, there's a lot that can be done to teach but like we're trying to figure out how to combat anti-Semitism. And I think having this information is helpful and being able to share that narrative, because even others who aren't Jewish but want to support us, they want to know the facts. And all they hear from our local population is, you know, Israel is a colonialist, you know, entity. So I want to, but I'm sharing this because I want to convey that message, because as you all like try to reach out to us, like I would be willing to come back on a conference call like this and hear more updates. You know, like I said, I hadn't been engaged in a long time, but this compels me. So like in the limited resources that you all have, how can you help arm us with the information so we could be better ambassadors to keep that support for Israel going?
What I can offer personally is that if you have a group of people there who are interested, be in touch with me and let's set up some sort of a program with them. I'd be happy to participate personally and bring in other people as well. They're muted.
Hey, Elliot, Aaron, so great to see you again. It's been many years, but thank you for doing this and really appreciate your time here. Sorry if I missed it, as I was a little late, but I'm wondering if you could give us your perspective on Bibi Netanyahu and the actions and decisions that he has been doing recently and leading up to everything. Over.
Wow. Look, I think that a good deal of what led up to the 7th has to be laid at his doorstep. Not maliciously. I think he fell into the same trap that many others did. And here I'll just give you a quick throwaway line. You know, Netanyahu is an economist. His fundamental background is economics. And one of the things that Karl Marx and Adam Smith have in common, and he's obviously a capitalist, an Adam Smith type, but what they have in common is the belief that economics drives everything. And people who think that way, and you could see that in his policies over the past few years, allowing Qatar to send money into Gaza, hoping to pay them off, the idea that improving their economic situation will deter Hamas, et cetera, simply ignored the fact that he was dealing with a radical jihadi organization, and that he's not the only one. Don't get me wrong, but he's the prime minister. So in Truman terms, the buck stops here. The sort of laid back approach that there's no real immediate threat has to be laid at his doorstep. Now, after the 7th, I give him generally high grades in decision making. I say generally, I have a lot of criticism, but all in all, I would say that we have responded well, and that's here again. The buck stops here. He's got to. If I can criticize him on one end, I can give him credit on the other end. But I'll say this, and without going too deeply into Israeli politics, I think that he's basically outlived his shelf life as a leader. 10 years plus as prime minister is way too long, and that has nothing to do with him personality-wise. It simply has to do with enough is enough, and it's time for somebody else to come in and take over. But certainly not by overthrow. There need to be elections, and if he wins again, he wins again. But my personal opinion is, as I said, enough is enough, if for no other reason, longevity.
Okay, I believe am I next?
Yes, you're up, Ellie.
Okay, thanks. Hi, this is Elliot Chodoff. Nice to see you again, Elliot. Spot 39.
Coming in very broken up.
Oh, sorry. Is this any better? I'm just driving.
Not hearing you.
Not hearing at all?
Every other word.
Every other word. I did write my question. If you see the.
Okay, so let me see if I can.
It's about Lebanon. It's about Lebanon versus Hezbollah.
Okay.
Why do we distinguish between Lebanon and Hezbollah? On the one hand, we complain that UNIFIL allowed for the development of Hezbollah, and not playing its role. Yet Lebanon is this entity that we don't seem to relate to. Lebanon is a sovereign country which has sovereignty over its southern border, our northern border. Why do we put blame on UNIFIL for allowing this? Why do we even bother saying Hezbollah, not just say Lebanon is attacking us?
Okay, because the reality is that Lebanon at the moment and for years now is a failed state. So we can take the legal approach, and I agree with you, legally, absolutely. Everything that happens on Lebanese territory and out of Lebanese territory is the Lebanese state and the Lebanese government's responsibility. But the fact is that there are two armies in Lebanon, and the Lebanese army is the second most powerful one. The more powerful one is Hezbollah. So until, and we're on the verge of doing it, we're in the process. And we're seeing, by the way, signs in Lebanon, this is the case, until Hezbollah is reduced in strength so that it is significantly weaker than the Lebanese army, there's no point in talking about a Lebanese state, because they're actually the gangsters who run the place. Now, what's interesting is that today, the leaders of the Druze, the non-Hezbollah Shiites, and the Sunnis, because the Christians don't really count, are already talking about implementing 1701 as Israel means it to be implemented, which is pushing Lebanese military sovereignty to the Israeli border. I think it's premature. As a matter of fact, Iran said, "Oh, we're willing to negotiate that with you as well." And the prime minister of Lebanon said, "Who are you? What are you doing in my country? Get out." So Lebanon is beginning to show the signs of real sovereignty. But until we take Hezbollah out of the equation, it's simply a myth. That's where we are at the moment. And by the way, let me just emphasize a point here, and it's a whole story in and of itself. Not every Shiite is Hezbollah or an Iranian Khomeiniist. There's a split in the Shiite world between Khomeiniist and non-Khomeiniist Shiites. There's an organization in Lebanon called Amal that is not Khomeiniist. And Nabi Berri, who's the head of who's the Speaker of the Parliament, who is Shiite, is not pro-Hezbollah, except when they hold a gun to his head. So there's a lot going on there in the background, but we still don't have a real country there in terms of power that can do what you're suggesting. And I agree with you. Structurally, legally, you're absolutely correct. But ultimately, the power of the gun is what dictates what's going on, and Hezbollah still has that at the moment.
So, Elliot,
yes.
Am I heard? Okay, I want to thank you so much. I think it was just amazing. Hopefully, a lot of people do join your podcast. If I could also say, your previous partner, you came with Israel Naaman. He also has a podcast, and a lot of you guys met him in your classes. And we're looking forward to have another talk like this in a month or so, definitely before Hanukkah. And once again, I want to, Missy, we're going to have 2 more people speaking. You know, before that, though, Jordan, why don't you say something? Let me introduce Jordan. Jordan is the COO of American Friends. He lives in Israel, but he just went back because of health issues with his parents. And so he's now in South Bend, Indiana. And he's running our organization so we can exist and continue to exist, and for hopefully not only for crises, but hopefully to build the Jewish people, which is really what we're about and what we're doing and what we're going to be doing. So Jordan, maybe say something.
Okay, Aaron, if I could just jump in and say goodbye. Great seeing everyone here, and be in touch if you're interested.
Okay. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of fans, Elliot. Thank you very much.
Bye for now.
Okay.
Thank you, Elliot. That was a fascinating discussion. And I want to thank everyone here for joining today. It's really been an incredible opportunity to see so many Chevre and who obviously all share a deep bond with Livnot and Tzfat and Israel. I want to highlight that we have some exciting initiatives that we're building. We have a model program that will serve as a foundation for follow-up activities in the United States, just as Livnot did in the early 2000s with a program called Alamot. So this is a kind of our critical step forward in terms of strengthening the connections that you've made here and also creating opportunities for others. So in the vein, the cost for each participant to come on a Livnot program for a week-long program is around $1,500, depending on how many people are in the program. But we've been having 15, 20 people on our programs. And so we're really thrilled, as Aaron mentioned, and Lior mentioned about our Serve Israel partnership, which was formerly Mosaic under the Ministry of Diaspora, and now they're mostly funded by the JFNA, the Jewish National Federation of America. And so Serve Israel is covering about half of the cost of participant. We still need to subsidize the remaining halves. And as Aaron mentioned, we do have an anonymous foundation that gave us a very generous grant of $175,000. It's a matching grant. And so, in terms of getting to our goal of bringing at least 400 people in the next few months to come on week-long programs, starting in the South, where Missy has been running them since February, week-long programs, and then eventually to the North when the northern border is secured, and we can run programs and rebuild homes in Kiryat Shmona and other communities in the North that have been evacuated and damaged since October 7th. And as probably many of you were on after the 2006 Second Lebanon War, Livnot was involved in rebuilding 220 bomb shelters. So kind of using that model and hopefully some of those partnerships that we built, we'd like to re-engage some of those initiatives or that initiative, not just bomb shelters, but as I mentioned, homes. And so what we're asking is really, we appreciate everyone's support. And if there are foundations or federations locally that you can help with, as Lior mentioned, not only bringing recruiting and follow-up activities with JCCs and other opportunities back in their hometown, but also raising funds to be able to bring more participants to Israel on Livnot and to be part of rebuilding the land, and in the meantime, rebuilding themselves as well. So we'd really appreciate any introduction, and we'd be grateful if you can make any introductions to, again, foundations or federations. And yes, we really appreciate all your continued support, and not only times of need, but helping to ensure that Livnot can continue and grow.
Thank you, Jordan.
So I'd like to hand it over to Missy, who has an exciting game for us, I think, up next.
Okay, so Livnot in the last 45 years has been running all different kinds of programs. So I thought it'd be a little fun to do just a quick trivia on different things that Livnot has done in the last 45 years. So there's a little bit of a trivia game that I'm hoping Ellie's going to put up. Ellie, are you able to do that? Okay, so I guess maybe raise your hand if you know the right answer. When was the first Livnot group? What was the first one? And actually, there's people who are here. Oh, people are able to answer.
So it looks like people are going through answering already.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay. So yeah, we got it. September 1st, 1980, 95% of you got it right. And as I give the answer, more of you are going to get it right. May 14th, 1948 was what? Anyone? Founding of the State of Israel. June 6, 67 was the Six-Day War. Okay, next question. Livnot has had several campuses outside of Tzfat. The Livnot campus in Jerusalem ran from 1993 to 2008. On what street was the Livnot campus in Jerusalem?
Is everyone able to answer? I see some people are answering. I'm not able to click on the poll.
Whoever's a co-host can't answer.
Ah, I see. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. Okay, so let's see how we're doing. You guys are doing great. Okay, Choice Yochanan Ben Zakkai is where that campus was in Jerusalem. Okay, question 3. True or false? In the first 3 years of Livnot, the Livnot campus was actually in Aaron Votzer's house in Spot. True or false? Yeah, we got it. Unanimous. True. So incredible that Aaron was able to host everyone in his own house. Okay, that said, in 1990, Livnot bought its present campus in Sfat. The building was uninhabitable, so Livnot built it from the ground up. What is the name of the street of the Livnot campus in Sfat? Simtat Al-Kavez, Rehov Ha'ari, Jerusalem Street, Rehov Livnot. Okay, the answer is actually Simtat Al-Kavez. Rehov Ha'ari would be a good, the Ari synagogue is, one of the main attractions in Tzfat, but Simtat Al-Kavez is the first one, was the correct answer on that
Ellie,
one. So you got it.
Ellie, I'm seeing comments that people can't see the poll anymore. Is there any way to repost it?
How are we doing now? When I scroll up, do people see that?
No, people don't see what you scroll. I can end the poll and relaunch it if we want.
Oh. We'll lose all the answers. People just have to be honest with their
okay
choices if they redo the poll. Yeah, if that's the only way.
Okay.
I guess maybe if someone X's out of it, there's no way to bring it back open if that was the issue.
So you have to scroll it.
Okay, so it looks like it was reset. So hopefully everyone has access. Also, I unmuted everyone or gave everyone the ability to unmute themselves. So if you want to speak, you're more than welcome to.
Okay, I'm just gonna go back over here. I'm now at question 5. The rooms on the Livnot Tzfat campus are named after mountains. Which one is not a Livnot room? A. Gilboa, B. Tavor, C. Hermon, or D. Tapuz?
Blair.
Tapuz.
Tapuz.
That's correct. Tapuz is an orange, not a mountain. Okay. Okay, we'll do 2 more. True or false? In the 1990s, Livnot dug in the Jerusalem Kotel tunnels, one of the main attractions when people go to Jerusalem today.
True.
True.
True. Very good.
True.
Number 7.
This is Lori, real quick. I was there. This is Lori from Spot 49. I was in the Kotel tunnels when they opened. I remember that.
Hi, Lori.
I
This is
love our
Karen
program.
this is Karen from Spot 49, and I remember you and digging in the Cotel tunnels.
Yeah.
Can someone please send some pictures of that?
Does that not happen anymore?
We can't find, no, we did it for, I don't know how
I'm
many
gonna,
years.
I'm gonna
Program
search.
for a
I know
week.
I have pictures somewhere. I'll
Please
search
find some
on.
pictures.
Yeah, I know I have pictures somewhere. Okay.
I have pictures too. T55.
I mean, I want pictures from everyone on all different projects. This is something very unique that we're the only ones to build and to be built. There's no other place that does it. And now, especially when we work with, we're going to be working with 6 professionals with every group of 20, 25 participants.
Okay. So I'm skipping to question 9. Livnot is currently looking for a new home in the South. Since January, Livnot has lived in 3 different locations. Where has Livnot not lived since the starting of our project in the Gaza envelope? A. Sderot, B. Ofakim, C. Netivot, or D. Kibbutz Alumim? Where have we not lived? So we were in Sderot for the first 5 months. We then went to Kibbutz Alumim for about 2 months. We're in Netivot in September. Ofakim, we haven't been there yet. So, and then finally, what is the best Israel program you have ever been on? A, Livnot, B, Livnot, C, Livnot, or D, Livnot? Okay. So it gives you a sense of the amazing things that Livnot has done over the last 45 years. And I actually asked Deb Rebeck, who is an old Livnot in Sfat, met her husband on her Livnot program and came back just in September. And I asked her to say a few words about the different types of Livnot programs that she's been on. So.
Hi everyone. I'm letting Larry kind of take some of my glory here too, since we did meet at Livnot. We did Livnot September of 1993 in Sfat for 3 months. Then I was the madricha for, I think, Jerusalem 4, and I think my co-madrichim is on this call, this Zoom. Avraham, are you there? And then I just got back from doing a week in South with Missy at Livnot. It was amazing. I can't believe after 31 years, my spackling and painting skills are still as good, if not better. And, you know, between the 31 years that I hadn't done a Livnot program, Livnot has still been so important in our lives. Keeping in touch. We had Michael Evanesh was our Livnot family, so we were lucky in the 90s to have him. And Aaron Boetzer, I feel like, is like a second dad. And our kids made Aliyah, live in Israel now, have been up to the campus. And my daughter works for Masa, and if she has people who can't do that program, she always tells them about Livnot. But I just do want to say, like, that week that I just spent with Missy down south at, we lived in Netivot, we worked on Kfar Aza, was the most, I don't even know how to explain it, but it was definitely changed me, and it was amazing. And it was so Livnot. That was the best part of it. It just had all the aspects of Livnot that I remembered and loved. And it was really, it was amazing. I felt like we did a lot in a week. We learned a lot, and I'm so grateful for Livnot, for every program I've ever done with them, and just still being around. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Missy.
I asked another recent Livnot person to talk to us. October 7th, 2023, basically affected the Jews worldwide in Israel and outside of Israel. In the last months that I've been working with Livnot, I've heard lots and lots of different stories. And I asked Shira Kaplan to speak to us. She is a assistant associate producer for the Kelly Clarkson Show. And she is living in a world, working in a world that is not necessarily pro-Israel. And I asked her just to say maybe a few words on how that has affected her professional career, her personal life, being a pro-Israel Zionist in a world that is not necessarily very accommodating to those thoughts and feelings. So, Shira.
Yeah, thank you so much, Missy, and thank you, Aaron, and
Missy and to the general. This is a very beautiful, or to the major, for speaking. This has been really beautiful. And yes, as you said, Missy, I'm a recent Livnoter, but it's beautiful, this legacy of so many years of volunteering, and it's beautiful to see how connected everyone still is to Israel. I thank God I was participated in Livnot this summer, and it was a really, really unbelievable experience. But I really wasn't able to talk to my coworkers about it. As Missy mentioned, I'm an associate producer on the Kelly Clarkson Show, and our show is actively apolitical. We don't talk about anything you might say that could ruffle any feathers, or our show is meant to be a departure from politics. But I think that the balance, or the fight between good and evil, which is what we're experiencing now with the story of October 7th and the difficulties that Israel has faced since, it doesn't feel political to me. It feels important, and that it's something that we should be speaking about. And as I mentioned to Missy, I've been pitching pro-Israel, or even just people to speak about anti-Semitism on the show since October 7th. I had just started at the Kelly Clarkson Show, moving from a different show when October 7th happened. And there was a very stark difference between, I think, the way that other minority groups who perhaps would have had some sort of mass casualty event happen to their group, how that was handled by our staff. There was no mention, there was no check-in on the Jewish members of the staff. There was it just wasn't really something that was able to be spoken about, because very quickly I found out that a lot of my coworkers who I became friends with did not stand on the same side as me. And so when I returned from Israel this fall, I really didn't want to talk about where I'd been. It was too complicated to explain that I wasn't on vacation in Israel. It was too complicated to explain what I was actually doing, and how important it was for me to be there. And so I've really retreated into my Jewish community. I've been so grateful for the Jewish community. I've been so grateful for people who, stand with Israel and are so proud to be supporters of Israel, like all of you in Livnot. And yeah, I've realized how important it is to, I've always been, in the Jewish community, but I understand this. Of course, there are great allies that we have in the non-Jewish community, but it's really important that we all stand together and stand unified against what we're experiencing and have been experiencing. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shira. If there's, it's late, but I guess a few minutes if anyone would like to just, sort of, anything they want to sort of put out there in a community that is open and welcoming to pro-Israel sentiments and support for Israel. If anyone would like to say anything. Okay.
Missy, I have a question that I want to pose to everybody, because I don't know if everybody is, we all have situations with family members and friends who are on opposite sides of us, and which makes family relationships very difficult. And I'm just wondering how you respond, if anybody can answer, like when people are accusing Israel of genocide, like what facts do you use? Like, how do you rebut? I don't believe that they are, obviously, and it's war and people die, but I was just wondering, like just not even just the genocide, but if anybody has found like useful answers to respond to people who think otherwise about the whole situation.
That's a great question. I don't have an answer, but that's a great question. I'm looking forward to hearing the answer.
We should have asked Elliot, really. We could all try to answer it. Michael gave a class a few times, and I wish he was here to answer it, about the ethics of the Jewish army. And I think that I guarantee you that if you compare Israel's army to any other army, there's no comparison. And I'd say especially the American Army, which look what they've done. And I mean, in Israel, I think anyone who serves, I mean, it has definitely you have ethical issues, but in Israel, a lot of times, a lot of people feel that we go so overboard that people have to bring a lawyer with them, even to the battlefield, just to make sure that they were allowed to pull a trigger, because there's all kinds of rules of when you're allowed to shoot and not. And and I'm sure that no one else does this. I mean, by the way, I have a grandson who was in the dining room with the Golani the other day when 4 guys got killed. And I mean, that has nothing to do with the question, but it's just, that's he got wounded. He got 4 stitches in his head. It was a miracle, my grandson. But there's rules of you have to. Usually we give even warnings before we bomb, and no one else does that.
Right.
You're not allowed to use, which is a very important tool in the army. It's called shachen, using a neighbor, that you take someone from the community to go before you in going into a house. Now we don't do that, and almost every army does that. And besides the fact we're now in a war against pure animals, and still there's so much effort being made to not doing anything that can be. My English isn't well enough to say it, but you always know that you have to go according to the law, to the international law, and not very many armies really do that.
Can I
Well,
make
I
a
think we
suggestion?
had-
Can I make a suggestion? Google Douglas Murray. He has an answer to
Oh, I
those
love
people.
Douglas Murray.
Okay,
He's
so
great.
try to mimic those kind of conversations. I think he really covers that pretty well.
Okay.
He covers. Like, where were you when Sudan killed the 2 million? Where were you?
I know, I know.
You know what I mean? I think talking technical isn't going to work. You're going to have to sort of push back on the concepts.
Okay.
One of the things I'm Leora. I'm a student on college campus in California. I did Livnot in July after I did Birthright. It was wonderful. And this is a question that we get a lot on college campuses, and so we say, there's not, by the UN definition of genocide is the intent to kill and eradicate a population. So technically there is a genocide of Hamas. We want to eradicate Hamas completely, but there is no genocide of people because there is no intent to kill civilians. And Israel has gone out of its way to not kill civilians. And I mean, I'm sure we've heard stories in here. We have heard stories in here about that. It's Israel has gone out of its way to protect civilians, and add to that, the numbers from Hamas have been, we don't know exactly what's true and what's not of it. Allegedly, there's been 40,000 people who've been killed, and of that, we don't know who's civilians and who's militants. I think it's about 50% militants from what they're saying, and 50% women and children, or a little less than that. And the numbers Israel is saying are less than that. So it's kind of, we're not going to know the actual amount of people who've died until the war's over. The other thing is, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, but basically there's not, the population hasn't, it's been approximately 40,000 since April. If there's a genocide, we're doing a really bad job of it. Thank you.
And can I add one more thing in that I say when it's a genocide or they come up? I'm Leora's mom. We did Livnot together. And if you look at the actual numbers of civilians to militants, the number in Gaza is about 1 militant to 1.2 civilians. Comparing that to a typical war, and a war that's not even in an urban setting, a typical war is more like 1 militant to 7 to 9 civilians. And if you talk to people from Vietnam, they will tell you that when the Viet Cong dressed up as women, hid in civilian areas in towns, what the United States did, we bombed the entire village.
Right.
So looking at from a historical point of view of what the numbers are, this is not a genocide at all. And we need to go and do that. The thing is, the American schools don't teach these numbers about war. War is terrible. But I often will also tell a story, or when I talked to when we were there, we were talking to different soldiers, and their intent with their missions are to take out only militants. Things go wrong, it's a war. Wars are horrible. But as the other people said, we can tell them that Israel sends warnings, flyers, moves people around. As a percentage, we certainly are not doing a genocide of what's going on there. It's just the media. I also tell people the media is sadly done largely by people who are young adults who have been paid from places like Qatar to go to the journalism programs. And we know at our journalism programs locally here in California, the students who are Jewish who want to say a positive thing about Israel are shut down. They are leaving journalism because their voices are silenced. So what we're getting therefore are these students who have been paid for to come from other countries with a very negative bias against Israel, and they're going in. And we are not seeing in the United States any of the suffering of the Israelis. And that is another thing I will talk about, is what is the suffering? My cousin who's getting bombed on the border of Lebanon, the things we saw when we were there, there's no voice in the United States for the suffering of Jews in Israel. As far as it seems, we're all sitting there having bubble baths in Israel is based, if you looked at the American news. So another part. Thank you. Hope that was helpful.
I would also like to add something, if that's okay. Do we have a minute? I served in the Army in between 2014 and 2016, right after I graduated my undergrad at Boston University. My job in the Army was as an education NCO, so education non-commissioned officer, and part of my job was to teach the soldiers about the values and the ethical code of the IDF, and that's something that the soldiers need to listen to. They need to have it like retaught to them on a regular basis so that it's ingrained in them. And you can find that on the IDF website in English if you want to look at what the moral code of the Army is. And one of the values is purity of arms and human life, and the preservation of civilians and not harming civilians. And that was a part of my job, was to teach the soldiers this on a regular basis so that they don't forget it and that they keep it with them. They actually have to have this little packet of the Army code, the ethical code, in their wallet with them at all times. So just for your information, I can send the link in the chat if you want.
Okay, I'd like to say thank you very much to everybody who participated and everyone who listened. We hope to do this, as was said, to increase this, and we want to keep you as part of the Livnot family, and we want we're looking forward to hearing back from you, from all of you. Okay, good night, everybody, or a good day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hag Sameach.
Hag Sameach.
Hag Sameach.
Thank you, everybody.
Looking forward to seeing you all again.
Thank you. Chag Sameach, and be safe.
Bye, Missy.